So today we're back. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you.
We're going to talk. So today we are talking about parents' relationships with teens, right?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of intrigued. Why do we talk about teen as a separate category in terms of relationship with parents? Why not all kids and parents?
Well, there are some similarities with younger kids and teens, but there are also some differences. It's like they're reconstructing their brain and hormones going on. And I think your parenting role is changing from being like the parent doing the upbringing. And then it's turning into you being more of an equal partner where they can communicate and you can discuss things. You're not supposed to have that negotiation and discussion so much in the younger years. So that's kind of the difference, really. And also, teenagers are not showing that they need you in the same way as young kids do. So they won't go and hold your hand or ask to sit on your lap or ask to be carried and get hugs. And they won't cry necessarily and say that they're upset and that they need you. So it's kind of hard to guess that they still need you as a parent. So I guess that's the main differences. And also, they've got more important people in their lives, and even though parents are still very, very important, they got peers and teachers and other role models who are also very important.
Yes, I was doing my research for this interview, and I found that when children, not so children, when kids reach puberty, they have a lot of change and development in their brain.
Yeah, and the good news is that if they've had some damage happening to them, either early childhood maybe they've had trauma happening to them, and maybe they've been bullied at school, or there's been abuse or something horrible that's happened to them. You can fix it because the brain is very flexible in their teenage years. So if you give them good care and good love and a safe environment in those teenage years, you can actually fix some of the damage that's done, which is quite incredible.
And that's very interesting. And so what does a positive relationship entail in terms of teens?
I think it means you having a look at yourself and your own triggers, and see, let's say you feel really rejected if your teen doesn't want to spend time with you. You can look at your own history of rejection and try and see, okay, why am I taking this so personally? Because really it's nothing personal. So it's a good period for you to be able to look at yourself and learn some new things about yourself, so that you can be more effective in the parenting.
I really want to stick here for a moment, because you said that when your kid is kind of rude or doesn't want to talk to you, it's not personal.
It's a way of becoming their own person. They're looking for their own identity, and I think they are trying to sort of get away from you at the same time as being close to you. And I think a part of that is some sort of rejection of you as a mum, because they want to be their own person and not to be dependent on you as a mum or a dad. And they could say things and show that they don't want to be with you. And I think for you not to get triggered is really important, not to take it personally, because it's really just a part of becoming independent. And what you don't want is a teenager who's still depending on you and still wanting to be with you all the time, and who don't have their own personal life with their friends and people from other places. So it's a good thing, but it's kind of hard sometimes not to get upset and not to get into an argument about it, not to try and force things. But I think if you're doing that and taking it personally, and then you create conflicts, which can be quite hard, and that can push the teenager further away rather than for them to feel welcome to come back when they're ready and to spend time with you when they want to. If that time that you spend together doesn't become quality time, but just becomes arguments and guilt trips and shame, and you being like the moral person trying to tell them how they should live and what values to have, then that becomes quite difficult. And they really need you to be that safe harbor still.
So you have to be there to give them that safety, but probably not be the correcting, don't do this, don't do that type.
Yeah, I think it's important that they feel they can talk to you, and I think you need to be available emotionally, and you need to show them you're able to handle what they got to say and what problems they're in, and for them to learn and have their own growth and making the mistakes. But I think if they can come back to you and share with you those mistakes and share with you their thoughts and feelings about it, then that's really great, because then you can talk and you can maybe ask for permission to come out with your suggestion, and then they might be able to have a lot of learning from the mistakes that they have to make, rather than just making mistakes and not talking about it and sort of harboring it all by themselves.
So that's an interesting word you use. Instead of setting boundaries, telling them, the tone has to change from telling to suggesting.
I think so. I think they won't have you telling them what to do, and also it's kind of, I mean, you can try and tell them what to do, but I think sometimes if you do that too often and too much, they just won't listen to it, and really there is not a lot you can do about it, because what you're going to do if they choose not to listen to you, it's not that easy to give them harsh consequences without there being like a further development of you falling apart and there being conflicts and you not having a close bond. So I think a lot of upbringing is already done by the time they're 12, 13. I think a lot of what you put in so far, and if you got integrity and they trust that you're honest, they trust that you love them unconditionally, and if you filled up their love tank a lot and you found their love language as well and you use those tools, I think a lot of it is done in the way of telling them what to do and being somebody doing the upbringing only. That kind of parenting is kind of finished.
It must be hard on parents to make that switch.
Yeah, and also it's hard not to get triggered and not to be upset and not to take it personally when they're slamming the door and telling you you're stupid and how dare you and you know, when they're reacting like that, or they won't talk to you and they're on the sort of power trip wanting to control things by not speaking to you or showing that they're upset but not telling you what it is, you know, that kind of power struggle. If you're getting into that, if you're parenting on your own, or if you feel that you're on your own with the teen, which is true for a lot of people, I think it's very important you've got somebody you can trust, that you can talk to, and somebody you feel safe with, that will listen to you so that you can vent your feelings without taking it out on the teen. And also, I think it's really crucial that you got your own love tank filled up, so that you can be responsible as a parent and an adult to make sure that your love tank is full. I think you can be a lot better at parenting the teen.
So the parents should actually look at the other videos to get their for tips on how to get their love tanks filled.
Absolutely.
And vent that out to their teens.
I think if you got a teenager with loads of hormones and loads of difficulties finding their own identity, feeling that they're not good enough, failing in either sports or academic results, or feeling left out socially, don't feel that they got friends, they might feel upset that they got spots or not the right hair or whatever they feel that they're not coping very well with. I think they have enough struggles with finding their own selves and identity without there being a difficulty with you as well. So you need to be able to support them and encourage them, and really make sure that you're giving out the positive feedback that they desperately need, even though they might kind of pretend it's not important what you think of them. I think for you to give them words of affirmation or quality time or acts of service, whatever their main love language is, for you to be able to give that, you need to make sure you're not on an empty yourself.
So I think this is a perfect time to go back to your experience with the family services, that time when you were working with teens. Could you tell me a little about that?
Yeah, we had, with Dr. Chapman's work, we call it an empty love tank. When people are upset and angry and they're not on their best behavior. And I had teenagers who didn't have just empty love tanks. They had love tanks with holes in them. So it took a lot of work to fill up their love tank. And obviously we had to use all the languages, but really make sure that we found out what their main love language was. So let's say a boy had words of affirmation. We would share the 5 love languages with the parents and tell them, some people have words of affirmation, some people have quality time, some people have acts of service, physical touch, or gifts. And we'd tell them about those languages and ask them, what do you think your son's main love language is? And they'd all agree. We'd ask the teacher, the neighbor, the granny, the dad, the mum, and they all agreed, oh, it has to be words of affirmation. That's when he really feels proud and happy. And when we taught them about these languages, we found that they started using the love language of their teen, and their relationships completely transformed. And let's say this boy, his name might be Paul, he would work really hard to reach his goals, like 2-week goals. And if he managed to reach all his small goals, then rather than giving him a gift or money, we'd give him a prize of we'd make a diploma and say, oh, you've managed to do so and so, and you've been able to go to school every day on time. You've been really positive in your way of speaking to others. You've been helpful in the kitchen, and you've been going to see the psychologist as agreed, something like that, and well done. And we'd read that in front of everyone, and he'd be really pleased and grow with that. Whereas we might have another teenager who had quality time as her language, and we would make sure that we had time to be with her. Let's say her name was Hannah. We'd make sure that we saw Hannah at least for half an hour, where we'd be in her room and really be available without the phone, without any distractions, without interrupting her if she's speaking, just like really being there. And we found with her, let's say it was a disappointment, let's say the dad didn't come after all, if we'd filled up her love tank by really being with her and filling out with quality time, she would just be like, oh, well, never mind, oh, he doesn't always do what he says he's going to do, and that would be the end of it. Whereas if we didn't fill up her love tank and we didn't show her that we had time for her and wanting to be with her, we would find the same incident would have her have a complete different reaction. She would scream and shout and throw things, or maybe run away. So it was incredible to see the difference in her. And with her, rather than giving her a diploma and praise her if she'd reached her 2-week goals, we'd give her quality time, which for her was to go out and take pictures with her favorite grown-up in the institution. And she'd go out to the sea and they'd take pictures all day. It was just different, and meeting those needs made a huge difference in those teams.
Yeah, there were astounding results as a result of implementing those five love languages, weren't they?
Yeah, we combined the 5 love languages with something called trauma-based care. And that means seeing bad behavior, whether it was self-harm or taking drugs or being violent. We saw that as an expression of pain rather than them being rude and difficult. And we saw it as an impact of their complex trauma early in life. So complex trauma being the abuse at home, or mental illness at home, or drug abuse, those sort of things that they've been through, and maybe bullying at school, those sort of traumatic experiences happening again and again with somebody close to them who was supposed to make them feel safe. So we combined that with the 5 love languages, and we had 58% success rate, meaning that they reached all their goals in 1 year or a year and a half. They would reach huge goals like stop being violent, going to school or work every day, having no mental illnesses, having a good relationship with their parents, being physically healthier, those sort of things. So really big, important goals.
Very interesting. And I guess this would be a perfect segue to kind of stay in the 5 love languages, and for the parents to kind of recap what those 5 love languages are, and some tips on how would the parents know what is the child's love language.
So the 5 love languages are words of affirmation, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and tangible gifts. And like I said, all people like all 5, but there'd be one that really speaks love to your teenager. And to find out, you could do an online test, which is free. You go into Dr. Chapman's site and the 5 love languages, and you can download that test and get your teenager to answer some questions. It takes about 15 minutes. Or you could be a bit of a detective and see what you think your teenager likes. And one way of looking at it is to find what he or she gets upset if they don't get. So if they don't get quality time with you when you're really present and doing what they like to do and being like an active listener, if that really upsets them when you don't give them that, then they might have quality time as their main language. If they get really upset about criticism, whether it's constructive or not, then words of affirmation might be their love language. You can find out in those ways, but I think the quickest and easiest way of doing it is doing that test.
Okay, we'll keep the link below for them to take the quiz and get the results. So I guess now we could go category by category to kind of give parents some tips on how to speak each of these love languages. Is that okay? So the first one is words of affirmation.
So words of affirmation is not just giving them praise on what they achieve, even though you should do that as well. And I think it's very important that you're authentic with all those love languages. And I think parents, if they're being fake, the teenagers will sense that. So you need to spend enough time with them to give them specific praise, so that you don't say, "Oh, you're such a good girl," or "Well done." If they might have been doing something, let's say they did something in the football field that wasn't that great, that they'd done it better before, and you say, "Oh, well done," they won't take it personally, and you will lose some of their trust. So it's very important that you know whether it's actually good, and then you can give specific praise. and you use their names. So let's say, Lily, well done. I saw the way that you passed the ball. That was really brilliant. And it was very specific. You say why that was important for the game, and you say how proud you are. And you also give them praise for things that you like about their personality. So it's not just about what they're achieving. It's really important for their self-worth that you give them praise about whether they're smiley, whether they got a sense of humor, whether they're intelligent, whether they're witty, whether they're helpful, whether they're considerate. Anything you can praise, you should look for it and praise them. And a lot of teenagers also like being praised in front of others. It varies a bit, so you have to know your team, but it could be effective if you do it in front of the family or in front of friends. I've also heard that people have been feeling really good about themselves if they've overheard you speaking positively about your team to your friends, sort of not them being around, but they could have been around just hearing it if you've been on the phone or something like that. And also, when you give words of affirmation, you could praise their looks. It doesn't mean that you're superficial, but I think for teenagers, looks are important, and they won't say that they need you to compliment them. So, and they won't admit that your opinion on their nice red hair or their broad shoulders, that they won't say that that's important to them. But I think they really appreciate it if you can say something positive about their looks as well. And you can send them words of affirmation in a text message. You could write them a small note in the lunchbox. I think that's better for girls than boys, from what I've heard from my teenage boys friends. They said that was a bit silly and childish, whereas I spoke to some of his girly friends and they said they'd like that. So yeah, loads of different ways of giving words of affirmation.
That is so informative. Thank you, Nita. And the second one is acts of service.
Okay, acts of service. I think when they're starting to be a teenager, rather than doing everything for them, I think a great act of service is to show them how to do things so that they become independent and proud of who they are and capable. I mean, there are so many things they have to deal with in their education and finding friends and later on partners and work. And there's so many things they need to learn as a young adult. So I think if they know how to do practical things at home, then that's a really good help. And so if you can teach them how to do the laundry themselves or clean the floor or do some cooking, I think that's really great. Somebody gave me a tip that you could write a list of things that you want to teach them, and you could have them write a list of things that they think they should learn before they leave home, and you can actually mix those lists and see what you can agree on and have them choose when to practice what, so that they feel that they're part of the decision and part of controlling what they're going to do. And I think that will bring a lot more positive attitude when you're trying to teach them things, rather than you sort of panicking and trying to teach them everything at once. I think that's a way of doing it. And I think giving the teenagers chores that they have to do is making them better at speaking the love language of acts of service, because then they know what it takes to do something and they will appreciate you more if you then help them out. So let's say they have to empty the dishwasher and take the rubbish out every day. If you do it for them, if they're in a rush, they will appreciate it more, rather than take it for granted if you keep doing it and if they're kind of like staying in a hotel all the time.
That is, I think parents are going to really love this tip, because they're getting some help around the house, and then they are also teaching how you reciprocate acts of service to their loved ones. outside the house, right?
Yeah, but I think it's quite, we're all so busy these days, I think it's quite tempting just to do it ourselves. So rather than teach the kid how to cook a meal, it's just quicker and easier just to do it yourself, and you'll be a lot more effective, and you won't be triggered of you being impatient when they're taking a long time or doing it the wrong way. You know, it takes something to do that. But I think it's definitely well worth it in the end, because you don't want to bring up teenagers who you wouldn't want your own children to marry one day. And you can always do things, like you can help them with their projects at school, you can take them places, you can iron things for them. You can always do things for them outside of that as well.
Very good. The next one is quality time.
Yeah. So quality time, to be good at that language, I think this is maybe one of the most important languages to speak if you've got a teenager, and I think that is to do active listening. And I think teenagers with that language as their main love language, it's really crucial that you prioritize them and that you spend time with them, that they don't feel that work or chores or hobbies or your own sports or whatever it is that you're doing, and that's not more important than them. And it's kind of a hard one to speak sometimes, because we have so much to do, and it's easier to give somebody a hug or a compliment. It's quicker, rather than taking the time out to actually do something that the teenager likes to do. But I think you will fill up their love tank and get a lot of things back from spending that time with them. But I think it's important you remember to do something they enjoy, show an interest by asking questions and really being present when you're with them. And again, do active listening. So that means not being on the phone at the same time, not checking out the laundry or not doing other things, not having the TV on, just really being there and listening without coming up with suggestions and without interrupting, which is hard for us. But I think it's well worth it. And you'd be surprised how much the teenager wants to share once you're really there. And what's quality time for your teenager varies, obviously. Some people like to go biking, some people like to go for a car drive, some people like making a cake. But I think we're playing cards, we're doing board games. I mean, the list is endless. It's up to you to find out what your teenager would like to do and ask them what they would like to do. Let's say we got Saturday, we got no plans. I'd really like to spend the day with you. Would you like that? And what would you like to do? Or even just half an hour. Now I've got half an hour before I need to start cooking dinner. I'd love to be with you. Is there something we can do together? So yeah, it varies. I mean, with the teenagers I worked with, they enjoyed, a lot of the boys have enjoyed going for drives, and we've had some of our best times doing fishing together. It's like you can do something, it's an activity, and you don't have to speak about stuff, but we've had a lot of good conversations, even fishing on the ice. And I also found being with teenagers, they still enjoy you not being good at things, because they're so used to you telling them how to do things and what to do and your opinion, and kind of thinking you're better at everything. And there's so many things they're better at, like playing computer games or ice skating or jogging and doing a race. And I think it's really good for them to beat you sometimes.
Very, very informative, very good insights. Excellent, Anita. The fourth is physical touch.
Yeah. So physical touch is kind of easy when you've got a baby, because you kind of carry them and maybe you breastfeed or you cuddle them a lot. very naturally. And also when they're older, they will ask to be carried, and they will hang on to your leg, and they will want to be on your lap. And teenagers, luckily, they don't do that. But it doesn't mean they don't have the need to have physical touch. And I read somewhere that research had shown that teenage girls who didn't get physical touch from their parents and didn't get any more physical touch from their dads, they would go and they would have sexual relationships earlier than other girls. So I thought that was quite interesting. So there's obviously a need to have that physical touch. But I think you need to be more creative. And from what I've learned, you don't give kisses and hugs in front of the teens' friends. It's very rare that they would appreciate that. They would probably find it embarrassing. But you can still do hugs and stroke them and things at home. And I sneak in like a hug, or I stroke my son's, he's 15, I stroke his back when we're watching crime together, and then he might give me his arm, and I can sort of stroke his arm and do things when it's like a dark room and nobody's there to see it. And he's also accepted me doing foot massage. And I think you need to be creative in ways of showing physical touch. And a lot of his friends and a lot of teenagers, they like play fighting. So if you got your partner or the dad or stepdad or whoever, if they want to do play fighting, that's really good. Or sports, there's a lot of sports that will have you do physical touch. With girls, I've had a good experience with people who, well, that was very, very sad. People who've been through sexual abuse at the institution, and they still needed physical touch. So we had to do that really gradually. We couldn't just go and give them hugs or touch their arm because they'd be scared by that. But our way through with those girls was to have them do the makeup. And they found that particularly interesting when I was going out on a date with my partner, who I now got. They were, oh, we want to do your makeup. And sometimes I looked quite, I don't know, very made up. But it was a way for them to be doing some touching without it being anything sexual or without there being any threat with it. And I find that with a lot of teenagers, that they want to do hair, they want to do makeup, and there's loads of ways to be creative in still filling up their love tank with physical touch.
So it's very interesting that you cited that research for girls, and I'm kind of interested to see if that would have similar results for boys if they didn't get that physical touch at home, that they would turn to relationship outside at a younger age.
Yeah, I don't know about boys. I only read it with the 5 Love Languages for Teens by Dr. Chapman. He was stating it about girls, but I don't know about boys. It'd be interesting to know.
Okay. So the last love language is gifts.
Yeah. This one, some people think that teenagers are greedy and they want as many things as possible, and they would guess, a lot of adults that I speak to, they guess that teenagers have got gifts as their main love language because they ask for things and they want things. But it's not the most important love language for most teens. Most teens want quality time with their parents. But gifts is not the same as materialism, and it's very important the thought behind the gifts. And teenagers with this kind of gift, they appreciate having people making things for them or having really thought through what they want to give them, and they might show that they're interested by knowing about the teen's interests or their favorite color or what they're into in music, or what something that shows that you're interested in them and that you've been thinking about them. It doesn't have to be expensive gifts. It could be cooking their favorite dessert, or it could be bringing a shell from the seaside in their favorite color, saying that you've been thinking about them. And a lot of the time it's about the wrapping or presenting it in a good way, maybe combining it with words of affirmation and saying, I gave you this gift because I care about you so much. I've been thinking about you and I really missed you. I hope you like this new pair of shoes, and give that in front of some other people. And to make them feel special with it is very important, much more so than the price. I think I had a girl in this youth institution, and her love language was obviously gifts. She would start in August planning her Christmas presents for her mum, and she would make a lot of effort looking for things, finding things, making things. She would do knitting, and she'd really think through the gifts, and there was a lot of love put into those gifts. And when she was reaching her 2-week goals, like I talked about earlier, she wouldn't get quality time going out taking photos, and she wouldn't get this diploma where we read about all of her achievements. She would get a physical thing, and at one point she would get a book. She was into Eminem, and she would get a book about him, and she was really thrilled, and you could see that she felt that we cared about her by having listened to her and knowing enough about her interests to get her the right kind of gift. And we wrapped it in nice wrapping and gave it to her in front of everyone and said, well done for achieving your goals. But I think it was the thought behind the gift that really made her thrive.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think I see a pattern in recognizing the 5 love languages for your teens, or even for your partner for that, is that the key is active listening, isn't it?
I think so. I think as an adult, and I think you're still responsible for the relationship with your teen. And I think that's definitely the key, to do active listening. And I think sometimes you should show that you're listening by ignoring the way that things are said. If they're full of hormones and they might have been dumped by their boyfriend, or they might have felt left out at school, or they might have failed at a test, or there could be all sorts of things that's nothing to do with you. But if they're shouting and swearing, or saying things in an inappropriate way, rather than saying, you don't speak to me like that, and I don't want you to speak like that, and behave yourself, and that sort of thing, rather than being obsessed about the way they're speaking, try and listen to what they're trying to say. What's their message? What is the upset about? What is it they're trying to communicate? And try and listen for that, so that you're more informed, and you might be able to help them somehow. But just being listened to in itself is healing, and for them to use words will activate that part of the brain so that the feelings are not overloading them. And I think that's really healthy in itself. But to be listening, and sometimes you could even show them that you are interested in what they're saying by, you could write things down and say, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you're trying to say? Do I hear you right? Did I understand this right? Do I interpret this right? By really getting what they're about. And I think that's extremely important for teens, and I think generally it's extremely important for all of us to be gotten and understood and listened to. So yeah, that's definitely active listening is the key.
Yeah. So much good, great advice here, Anita. Before we end this interview, what would you like to say to the parents with teens? Any last words? Yeah,
that they are going to be like a 2-year-old wanting their mummy and hot chocolate and a hug and a teddy, and then they'll be like a 20-year-old thinking they can do everything themselves, and they're a lot more clever than you, and that you're stupid, and they will reject you, they will push and pull, and they will still need you. And make sure you've got somebody you can turn to, so you don't take any of that personally. It's just a part of being a teenager, and they still need you to be there and to love them and be a discussion partner.
Wow, that's so important. Thank you so much. And we will have the 10 tips for parents with teens, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll post the link below for the 10 tips from Anita. Sign up and you'll get those yummy 10 tips to implement for you with your teens. Thank you so much, Anita.
Thank you, Sadiksha.